Hey Dave, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, Emmett?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on our channel, the Good Soil, going live with Good Soil weekly
Yeah,
chat. Thanks,
yeah,
appreciate
I'm
it.
excited. I've watched a bunch of your live streams here, and I'm super excited about what you guys are doing here. I think you guys are doing the right thing here.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I figured might as well try this out and see, see how it goes. And it's a good, forum for Matt and I to kind of chat openly about what we're thinking. We have these chats a couple times a week anyway, but we thought, hey, why don't we do a weekly live stream of what we're thinking and try to get some special guests on from time to time. And so, yeah, we'll see how it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. I mean, you and Matt have, I think, not just chemistry, but you actually have complementary skills, and
I
I
think
think
so
it.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really exciting to see how that is coming out. So
Yeah.
excited to see what you guys have
Yeah.
in store. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah. Matt's off this week,
Mhm.
so thanks for coming on. And in a couple weeks, I'll be off, and he'll have hopefully a special guest or two. So yeah, first, usually what we do is we chat about just some general macro market stuff, and then we go into like Tesla specific or investment idea stuff. And I
Sure.
guess we're waiting for people to come in live, and we'll go over a bunch of questions. I know we submitted on Twitter. There's a bunch of questions queued up there, and then people who are watching live can start typing in their questions, and our behind the scenes guy Alec will help queue them up for when we're ready for that.
Awesome. Sounds
So
good.
yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on of like the recent China crackdowns with internet stocks, and now there was like some news of like them being concerned about electronic gaming being a concern there. That's something we have to pay attention to since we're heavy on Roblox, and Roblox is trying to build a presence in China, so it might affect that, you know. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about like China's kind of policies for this, or how they're going about it? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I've been following China for a very long time, probably over what 30 years when I was like in college. It was one of my fascinations, like China, but also at that time the Soviet Union, and I ended
Hmm.
up like studying East Asian kind of political economic development. So really
Hmm.
went into kind of Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Japan, all these countries are how they developed economically, but what the role of the government was to support that or not support that, and also studied China too. And over the years, what I've seen is China is actually doing like they're just doing what's obvious, and what is obviously has been done in that region. And so
Hmm.
um, they went heavy exports, and a lot of the governments in those times were criticized for being a lot very authoritarian, especially
Hmm.
even Korea. It was criticized. South Korea was criticized being very like authoritarian in the 70s and even 80s. Um,
Hmm.
but what a lot of people didn't understand was that a lot of these governments are ultra practical governments. They really are long term thinking, and they have a game plan. Like it's
Hmm.
really a game plan. So they know the next 5 or 10 years what they need to do, like what industries to support, how they're going to do it. It's all laid out. In the Western world, it's really hard to understand that type of government because the government in the Western world are much more chaotic. It's much
Hmm.
more like consensus driven, and things do really change. If you have a different president, it really policies do change.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah.
absolutely.
However, in China, it's much more steady. Like people think that it's they reflect, impose their own political biases onto China, but the reality is, China's been rather consistent in how they're progressing with economic development. Um, I'm not a fan of their political kind of human rights aspect, but on their economic front, um, they are so precise, so practical, so long-term thinking. They're following the East Asia playbook for economic development, and this whole latest crackdowns, in my opinion, it's just part of the like what they're doing. It
The
doesn't
long-term
change
plan.
course.
Hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't change course. Their companies are going to grow. The economy is going to grow.
Yeah.
The companies will adjust to different, different things. I think there was this thing where the tech companies were gaining a lot of power. There was maybe some dissatisfaction, discontent, and the government stepping in to show who's
Who's
in control.
boss? Yeah.
Yeah, but overall, I'm not concerned. Like in terms of I don't think this changes China's trajectory in any way. I still think there's some great companies out there,
Hmm.
but it shows the reality. This risk is always there that the Chinese government is going to step in, do something crazy.
Change some
Everything,
policy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's always a risk. So with China, one of my concerns is I think to be a heavy investor there, you need to have boots on the ground. You need to
Mm,
really like be there, understand the culture, the news, the companies, etc. But yeah,
mm.
did you
Yeah.
by chance hear about that Ray Dalio piece on China?
I saw you. I think you tweeted something out about it. I didn't read it all. I
Yeah,
kind of skimmed it. I tried to do like the Dave Lee speed reading, which
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
really good at yet. But I tried
yeah,
to read a couple of sentences, and I saw that he
yeah,
thinks it's just kind of, we have to be. It's not necessarily bad. It's sort of like we just have to adjust to it and
yeah.
embrace it. Sort of. Is that sort of the gist?
Yeah, the gist of it is, and the reason why I tweeted that out is because I'm like, wow, like there's so much noise with China right now.
Yeah, there is.
And a lot of it comes from people who don't understand China. And I could pick it up actually quite fast a lot of times because I'm like, oh, this person doesn't understand China or that region,
Hmm.
like the cultural nuances. But with Ray Dalio, I was actually very impressed. I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, actually he understands actually what's
Yeah.
been going on in China.
Yeah.
So I was impressed at his take it being kind of similar,
Yeah.
different angle but similar to mine.
I think he could be right, and then folks like Spark Invest or whoever's kind of spooked about it could also be right. It's one of those things
Mhm.
where you could have like two sides of the coin both being sort of right. Like long-term fundamentals, probably, maybe Ray Dalio is right that it's
Mhm.
strong still and nothing to worry about. But short-term, just the worry of average investors or institutional investors that don't have full confidence are going to get spooked and close some positions out in China and just cause like market drops in Chinese, U.S. listed stocks of Chinese companies and
Yeah.
such. So it's kind of like one of those situations where you have to see both sides, I guess, but they're both sort of right in in short term, it's probably very jittery for the market when these things happen, but long term, it's probably still bullish. It doesn't change much, maybe. Is that kind of your
Yeah.
feeling?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it could shift some type of it could signal a shift of strategy in
Mm-hmm.
with China government where they're not as tolerant with these big tech companies,
Mm-hmm.
like Alibaba and Tencent, etc., and the power that they're influencing. So it could signal actually a slight shift where um, it could damper, some of their future prospects. So yeah,
Mm.
definitely something to look out
Interesting.
for. Yeah,
Yeah, some of these companies are taking big hits on their market
yeah,
cap. So
yeah,
could be a big sale or maybe it's pricing in what's going on. So
yeah.
yeah, and speaking of market jitters, I think this Delta variant, the news cycle is sort of still picking up on this and causing, I think, trying to get clickbait headlines as much as possible. I'm sure it's serious, but I personally don't think it's near as serious as it was, when the original COVID strain came out. We didn't have vaccines or antibodies. We didn't know much about it or how to treat it, and so I don't think it's as personally as big of a health problem, close to as big of a health problem, but I still think that there's kind of mass hysteria potential from the news headlines that could create shockwaves in the market, but hopefully not near as bad as the last COVID crash is my thought. And maybe we've already seen those kind of shockwaves hit in the last couple of weeks with a few like 3% down moves here and there. But it's possible, in my opinion, we could drop another 5 or 10% if suddenly the whole nation goes on lockdown or attempted to go on lockdown, which I don't think would happen. But you
Mhm.
never know with the political environment what they're going to try to push forward with. Do you have any thoughts about the Delta variant, how that's affecting things in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I've been actually this past like week or so, I've been diving into some more of the like, pros and cons of the vaccine and looking into Delta somewhat and looking at the bigger picture. I mean, on kind of a just a purely macro or economic view, yeah, I agree. I think our economy is different. We're prepared more. I think just people in a way are almost at the other extreme, very, very, cautious. And I think it's hard to see the economy and the nation or the world be taken by surprise like it did, early
Hmm.
last year. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm actually like pretty optimistic in terms of the economy, and its robustness. Sure, there could be its fluctuations and jitters, etc. But I think this whole delta poses this other kind of bigger question or questions where I'm having a really hard time getting objective information on
Yeah.
like these vaccines, like the pros and cons, is what type of dangers, and I'm seeing a lot of, media saying that, hey, there is no danger, you know, it's perfectly safe. But
Hmm.
intuitively, I understand that there's always two sides, you know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
like you can't
yeah,
just believe someone who says that. And so
yeah.
as I've been looking, okay, what's the other side to the vaccine, you know, kind of story. And yeah, I was doing some Google searches and I just couldn't find anything. I'm like, this is fishy, you know? It's
It's like
like,
scrubbed.
yeah, completely scrubbed. And I look at YouTube, I'm like, I can't find anything. You know, everything is just positive on this thing. I'm like,
And that
this
makes you
is,
more suspicious, right? It just makes you more suspicious when
yeah.
that
I
happens,
mean,
right?
it's the if it becomes where the censorship becomes the bigger problem than even
Yeah,
the thing that you're researching, right?
yeah.
And
Like if they just let everything out the way, like
exactly,
if they let freedom of information, maybe we'd research it and be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But now that they're like, it's like being scrubbed, it makes us really like, makes a lot of people very suspicious.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, this poses a bunch of questions, but kind of like, how do we find accurate information when in a world where so many things are kind of on a platform
Yeah,
that is biased in certain ways? But I think it goes back to some of the stuff we talk about often. It's kind of independent thinking, where you can catch that. You're like, this is fishy, man. You know. And I think
yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of investing, those are sometimes the best things opportunities, you know, where you have 99.9% of the population believing a certain thing, but you
yeah,
know intuitively something's off, you know, and then
yeah,
it's actually just because most people believe in something doesn't mean it's, you know, the right thing or the
yeah.
most opportune. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm still, for me, I'm still on, I'm not 100%. You and I talk about trying not to think binarily and try to think
Yeah.
probabilistically. Like for me, the probability the vaccines are good is higher than 50%, but it's not 99% to me. Like a lot of people think it's
Exactly.
100% given, but I think, okay, I think the vaccines are probably the right thing, the good thing, but the fact that you can't find a lot of information kind of skews my uncertainty about what the probability should be in my mind. Whether, if I naturally saw the information, maybe I'd come to like a 98 or 95% conclusion myself. But because you can't find a lot of honest, you have a lot of disinformation about anti-vaxxer. There are some anti-vaxxers that are, crazy, but there
Yeah.
also are some legitimate questions that get kind of scrubbed, and you have some of that. And so it just raises my uncertainty level because we try to be independent thinkers, like we said. Sometimes maybe it backfires or maybe it's good, but when markets, when employing that to markets, it's generally a good thing when investing because you can get some
Yeah.
big returns on those occasions. I don't know how to apply this particular discussion to the markets right now, but maybe there
Yeah.
will be a way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of the bigger markets, I mean, the infrastructure bill, that's been getting some headlines recently. I mean, what do you think the latest chances are that this, $10,000 EV credit will come to fruition for all EVs? I mean, I saw Elon tweeted
Yeah.
something, favorable to the Biden administration wanting 40% of all cars to be EVs recently. And so it sounds like things are on the momentum's going the right direction, but do you have any kind of thoughts or analysis on that?
Yeah, so it seems like, you know, the EV tax credit is pushed to this whole budget reconciliation process. So the infrastructure bill, 1 trillion doesn't include it, and they might vote
Mm-hmm.
on it this week. By the end of the week,
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking before they go on a recess until like September or something, September 20th, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So if they vote on it, then they're also trying to start the budget reconciliation process. And they're trying to vote on that this week. We'll see if they can start it. But then the actual budget reconciliation process, which could include the EV thing, they'll probably start talking about it in September. My guess is probably late October or something, November. We might get some type of, you know, passing. I think
Yeah,
the Democrats are going to pass something because they got control.
yeah.
You know,
This is their chance.
yeah, this is their big chance. You do it the first year. Also, if you're a Democrat, you have the most kind of political capital. It makes sense. My, I don't know. I'm curious what you think on this. I'm kind of torn a little bit because I feel like
I am too.
a tax credit. I kind of like think that 7,500 might be a little too much if it's for like
Yeah,
over 5 years. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I kind of think, you know, already EVs are reaching parity, almost there. Um, I don't know if you need some type of thing that's like 5 or 7 year long, you know, like unlimited, uncapped
yeah.
7,500. I think something like $3,000, you know, for 4 or 5 years, that would be sufficient, you know.
I think
Um,
so.
but I don't know. What's your take?
Yeah, I sort of think that it would help the EV industry for sure, I think, but I don't think Tesla necessarily gets incremental. advantages from this. I think their demand is pretty much unlimited in the U.S. as far as for year. Like their demand is as much production as they can make for the next few years anyway, even whether you have this or not. But I think the perception for the near-term stock price will be like, oh, this is great for Tesla. The demand is not an issue anymore, and the stock could take a nice bump from it, from the assurance of the demand never being an issue, But I do think in reality, long term, it doesn't make much of a difference to Tesla's bottom line. Maybe Tesla could raise prices a little bit more than they otherwise would have actually, so maybe they'd have a little better margins. But it also creates room for a lot of other EVs to get in the space that otherwise wouldn't. So in general, for the EV industry, I think it's good. But from Tesla's specific viewpoint, long term, I'm sort of indifferent. But near term, I think it's good for Tesla's stock price, or the perception of Tesla, near term. That's my view. I mean, I think, I'm not opposed. I mean, I think 3,000 or 4,000 would be sufficient and would be helpful. And if it was like a huge drag on the taxpayer, I'd say, sure, that's probably better. But, considering everything else the government's spending money on, I feel like 10,000, I think it was a few $100 billion would have to be allocated to that 200 billion or something like that. I mean, to me, that's a substantial amount of money. But for what the government spends money on in general, I feel like that would be a much wiser use of their money versus 90% of the other stuff the government spends money on, So relatively speaking, I'm not opposed to them having kind of a higher credit that goes directly into the consumer's pockets, so to speak, versus all the pork they spend money on otherwise,
Yeah. I mean, it's a complicated thing because on one hand, if you do aggressive incentives for a long period of time, you're going to help the EV adoption. And, in the world of kind of, extreme weather, climate issues, I mean, any urgency could be, actually very important. So that's one side. The other side is kind of like, I think people are mostly underestimating how much this stuff costs. Like when I do just the basic calculations, if you do $10,000 credit, every 1 million, every 1 million vehicles is $10 billion. So if you do like 10 million vehicles, that's $100 billion. Which, now the government's talking trillions always, so maybe it's not that much, but still, it's like if you do it for 5 or 6 years, it's going to be far more than 10 million vehicles. We're talking about it could reach 10 million a year, even. So so
true.
But we'll see. I'm sure they'll adjust it though if it becomes too pricey.
I just think it's a good way for the government to funnel money directly into like dollar for dollar directly in consumer pocket without like the middleman government taking a big chunk of it in between and wasting it on whatever the governments typically waste things on. So, but it is expensive. You're right. It is a very expensive bill. Maybe they'll settle at like 7,500 or 5,000 or something. But whatever they should do something. It would be good to do something.
It could be like kind of what is that punity for all their years of supporting the oil industry. These polluting cars. Like like payback, or something. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure there's tons of lobbying going on both directions for this right now. It's probably, if you're in like the lobbyist world, please do, if you're a lobbyist or in the lobbying world, please do reach out to Dave and I on Twitter, or me at least. I'm curious to see from that perspective what's going on with this infrastructure bill. I'd be super curious to chat with someone who's like a lobbying person in this industry. Anyways, so also, speaking of Tesla, I mean, Elon's no longer doing the quarterly earnings calls. That's a pretty big deal. But I think most long-term investors see that as a good thing, right? We see it as he has more time to dedicate towards the things that are more important, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. To me, it's kind of a non-issue. I mean, So I mean, I like hearing him on the conference calls because like you get this.
Me too.
It's kind of a lecture,
it's like a teaching moment.
Tangents. Yeah, exactly. But on the flip side, I think he can be a little bit. At times, I think some of his timelines are counterproductive. And I actually think Zach and Drew and some of the others might actually handle the timeline aspect and keeping analyst expectations in line. I think they might do actually a better job with that. So, and I don't know, I just don't see, I mean, as long as if Elon, I love Elon's interviews though. That's the thing. If he could continue more and more just engaging with media or people, I think that's underrated, I mean, I hope he keeps up that part of it though.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Speaking of which, have you is there any news on your front with the potential interview yet, or is it still
Not
kind of
yet.
waiting
I've
a
reached out
while?
to Tesla's IR. Haven't heard back yet, so we'll see.
We'll see.
But I
Yeah.
figure I was telling my wife, like, you know, even if it doesn't happen this week, at least he's publicly kind of committed to it. So,
Yeah.
I'm
At some
guessing
point
it'll
it'll
probably happen
probably
sometime.
happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and there's the AI day coming up, which is a big
yeah,
deal. Maybe after that, there's stuff time to digest what's going on and interview about more ideas after that and stuff. So there's no rush. I agree. But
yeah,
it'll be incredible, historic if you get a chance to interview him though. And
yeah,
everyone watching this, I'm sure, loves your interviews and such. I mean, speaking of the AI day, I mean, we've had a chance to kind of speculate on that. I mean, it seems
yeah,
like it's a huge recruiting effort for machine learning, neural network type folks, but he's gonna provide a vision, right? He's gonna have his vision displayed or presented on this AI day. Do you have any thoughts on what his vision might be? I mean, I know you've talked about it a couple times on your channel.
yeah,
If you want to,
yeah. I mean, this morning, so there's a few breaking kind of news. So, um, someone tweeted out a picture from the invite, AI Day invite. It starts 5 p.m. on August 19th,
oh
supposedly,
wow,
but it's a picture of a multi-layered chip. And it appears to be kind of like the Dojo chip that Tesla has created. So it seems like
wow,
they'll give a lot of information about that. The person who tweeted that though is this guy Dennis Hong. He's a professor at UCLA. He runs their robotics and mechanisms lab there, and they actually specialize in like humanoid robots.
wow.
I was looking at their website and some of his videos, and then someone in his thread asked him, "Oh, are you partnering now with Tesla?" And then he
Hmm.
replied and he said to the effect like, "Oh, I can't reveal any details about that yet." And he had a couple excited
Wow,
emojis about that, and people were like, "Oh, you just basically
wow.
announced it, right?" I replied, "I'm like, congrats, right?" But if you think about it, these partnerships take a long time. You just don't sign
Yeah,
it in one day, right, or one week.
yeah,
So what
yeah.
it shows Tesla has been engaging with this guy, his lab, um, and his team for a while. It must be months, right, of conversation, and it looks like if they were just talking, then he wouldn't say, "Oh, I can't reveal anything yet," right? I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
seems like
That's.
there's something going on. There's some type of arrangement, kind of like with the whole battery,
I was just thinking that Jeffrey Don and stuff way
yeah,
back
yeah,
when they
his
started
labs up
those
there in Canada.
partnerships. Yeah.
Exactly. It seems like perhaps Tesla is reaching out to some cutting edge robotic labs. It helps in different ways because they get access to that technology. The labs
Yeah.
get access to Tesla's AI and other stuff to experiment with. So it just boosts up everything. Their prominence
Yeah.
of being a robotics lab just goes up a few notches.
Very
And then
mutual. Yeah.
yeah, and then also Tesla gets to recruit from those lab students, so they get the best students. It just like it's a win-win for everyone there. And my hunch is like he was one of the first to get the invite, right? So meaning like this whole concept of robots beyond
Mm-hmm.
just the car. So you're talking about
Mm.
perhaps factory robots, household robots, outdoor robot,
Yeah.
whatever. This is something that it's not just you know, wishful thinking 5 or 10 years down the road. It seems like
Mm-hmm.
Tesla's actually making like real investments in this area. And I tweeted this a while back. I'm like, we're we're at this like crazy junction in history where crazy turning point where robots are getting the intelligence, starting to get the intelligence to start to replace what humans do, but eventually they will likely be able to do almost everything physically that we do, probably better than us,
Mm.
long term when we think about it. And we're at this turning point. And Elon replied to that saying, "Yeah, I think he's saying something to the effect it's a remarkable junction in history." And
Mm.
like the thing is like Elon's been tweeting about this so much, real
Yeah.
world AI, and everyone's
Yeah.
like, whatever, whatever, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. What does
And
that mean?
in the
Yeah.
background, he's like inking partnerships with robotic labs, who
Yeah.
are making humanoids. You just combine AI, real world AI, with these robots. What do you
Yeah.
get? It's like obvious, right? What you get, but yeah, interesting, fascinating stuff.
Yeah. I can't wait to see this presentation. I mean, I remember the autopilot or the self-driving presentation years ago, and the stock kind of, anticipated it and went up. And same with Battery Day. The stock was kind of going up leading up to it, and then it kind of tanked right after. So I almost wonder if it'll be a good short term. Same with the Cybertruck. All these big unveilings or big things, the stock sometimes kind of creeps up going into it, and then just takes a quick break right afterward. Consolidates 10% more after, and it could be the last good buying opportunity if that happens on this one. But in terms of the actual content of the AI Day, I'm super excited to see it. You and I will eat that up. Any Tesla nerd, pretty much everyone watching this will eat that up. We're all looking forward to that. Did you happen to get an invite? You didn't get an invite.
No. I haven't gotten one. Yeah.
It's gonna probably. Did it say on the invitation where it is? Is that their Hawthorne or Fremont?
I think Palo Alto.
Oh, way up. Okay, northern. I'll be down Southern California then, so I wouldn't be able to go if I probably wouldn't get an invite. But
yeah, I've got
it'd be
travel
so
plans
cool to
myself.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be cool. I know you're talking to James Douma later on this type of stuff, so I'm looking forward to hear your guys' detailed speculation on this stuff coming up later today.
It's funny because like he's got such a, not just a technical background and understanding of this stuff. Like he connects it with, like, opportunities and the knowledge of Tesla as well, and Elon. So, for example, someone tweeted or asked him this morning what that chip picture was, on the invite. It has all these like 10 different layers, and he's like, oh, it's this type of chip, I think, with this type of thermal whatever management, all this stuff. So he's able to kind of understand like what Tesla's doing on a different level than us mere mortals.
He's a good translator for us. He's a good translator. Yeah, like George Hotz was kind of an interesting guy. He was fun to talk to. He could translate things too, but his personality is pretty intense. But he's a funny guy. He's a good guy. He's smart. Sees things at interesting angles. But James Douma is much more laid back, easygoing. I think he's very open minded too, and so it's really interesting to hear his perspective on this stuff.
Yeah. Hey, George Hotz, what did you think about the interview we did with him?
He's a brilliant. There's no question. Even before we interviewed him, you just know from everything that is out there about him, he's a brilliant mind. He's one of those 1 in a million computer hacker dudes. Whether he's one of the top 10 in the world or the top 1,000, he's somewhere in there probably for sure. So it's just good to talk to him and hear his side of things. His personality, it's fun talking to him. I was listening back to it on 1.5 speed, and all our personalities change when you listen to it like 1.5 or 2x speed. But his is extra funny, like to listen to at 1.5 speed. It was funny in real time anyway, but it was just like extra cartoonish, but in a good way. And he can run circles around me, like with the computer science, thinking, probably anything really, but he's a smart dude. But I thought he brings a perspective that's kind of refreshing to hear because it's different than what we're used to in the tunnel vision of the Tesla Twitterverse. Like he kind of provides a fresh perspective from Comma.ai and their approach, which is important to listen to and understand, how fundamentally different it can be in certain ways. Yeah. What was your kind of impressions?
Yeah, I think a bunch of different things. One, I didn't expect him to be so entertaining and so engaging.
Yeah, it was great.
It was a fun conversation and gracious. He was very generous with his time and everything. So I appreciated just the time with him. In terms of technically speaking, like I was actually very, I came across with more conviction regarding Tesla's approach. I just feel like their approach on one side, it's a genius business model. You're going after the aftermarket. It feels like. The aftermarket add-on market. You're not even going after the OEM, like partnership market. You leave that to Mobileye. You leave the integrated kind of, leader position to Tesla. You go after kind of the aftermarket. I wouldn't say it's the aftermarket stereo market, but it's a different aftermarket. It's an aftermarket driver assist, market. That's a new nascent market right there. And so all they have to do is they just have to continue to offer something that is getting better. And who's going to be able to beat them long term if they already have 20 people? They'll probably grow to 30 or 40 in the next couple of years. You've got this large open source community that already supports 130 vehicles. It's going to be hard for a new company to beat them in the aftermarket space. Right? They've got that cornered right now. And I think George, his real key inside realization is, we just need to just continue to plug away and we'll win a good chunk of this aftermarket market, which is billions and billions of dollars. We could be
Yeah.
a large company
Huge.
just off of that,
Yeah.
and we don't even need to be in the same distance. We don't have to compete with Tesla per se.
Yeah.
Because we're in the aftermarket. Who are they competing with? They're competing with almost nobody.
That's
So I
right.
think that's his key insight. And then he could position himself the whole time saying, oh, we're almost as good as Tesla. We're chasing them, which is, in my opinion, doesn't make a lot of sense because
Yeah.
they're like in completely different categories.
Hmm.
Tesla
Hmm.
is an integrated system, 8 cameras, really pushing the limits on full self-driving. They're really like lane keeping right now. Um,
Yeah. They're just trying to
and
be like the full. They'll be trying to be like the pure autopilot on highways. They're
yeah,
trying to be like the.
yeah, yeah, for a while, but then once they get to like 50 or 100 employees, right?
Yeah.
And they've got like hundreds of thousands of unit sales and stuff. Now it's going to be a lot easier for them to add on those features, right? Like the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
turnings and all that stuff. But it'll be in a completely different kind of generation of change. Like
Yeah.
Tesla is pushing the limits, comma is going to go slow,
Yeah.
and because
Yeah.
one of the things is existentially, they don't want to go too fast because they'll get too much criticism and people will try to shut them down, perhaps,
Yeah.
regulators, etc. So
Perhaps.
they want to err on the side of safety, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And so genius business model.
I think it's a great business
Yeah,
model too. Yeah, he wants
yeah,
to. I think their logo, their one of their logos is like "Keep driving, chill" or something.
yeah,
So they want to. Yeah, I agree with you. I think
yeah,
inevitably you'll have some automakers. Right now they sell to do-it-yourself people, right? You got to do it. You got to get that kit. And I saw the Comic-Con
mm,
presentation or the keynote. I didn't watch
yeah,
the whole thing; it was long, but I saw George's keynote, and
mhm,
I was impressed. And the thing that sticks out to me is it's really just for do-it-yourself people still. At
yeah,
some point, I think when they get favorable terms from like Ford or GM or Volkswagen or something that says, "Hey, can we just add we'll pre-order 1 million of your units and at your price, and we just want to have it as an option that we can add on to all our cars we sell, for consumers." I think he would take it if it's favorable. It would be a huge boon for his business, right? I mean, it would still be independent. It would just be put on a dealership or something versus people that, because there's a lot of people like
mm,
me that don't want to do it yourself. Like, I would if I
yeah,
had to, but it's just a pain for a lot of people that are busy to like get this thing and try to figure out how to do it themselves. So I
yeah,
think that's in the wings for them. I think that'll happen sooner or later. And that'll be like when they really get on the map
yeah,
in terms
yeah.
of everyday conversations.
Yeah, I mean that's the optimistic view. The other side is, let's say they do really grow a lot.
Yeah.
Let's say 10 years down the road, there could be this tension between the automakers where if enough people are foregoing not buying the integrated, let's say, system,
Hmm.
um, opting to put on comma system later, then you could see a whole flurry of different tactics by the OEMs because this is margins. Like they are experts in tweaking
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
0.1% margin. You're talking
Yeah.
about lawsuits, different ways to try to prevent,
That's true.
the
Yeah. The
hacking of it. Just
warranty of the car they could void if you
yeah,
try
they
to
could
put
do a
something like that
lot of
on it.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it could get messy.
Yeah, they're
But
still under the radar enough right now where they're not, threatened yet by that. But yeah, you're right.
yeah,
Maybe as they
exactly.
get more
But
successful.
that's a super long term. Like if they're successful, and if they're successful, Commo will also have different options themselves, I think, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's true. That's true. So yeah, I think we've chatted a lot about stuff. Alec, do you want to? I think Alec and our running this restream has collected some questions from Twitter first. So maybe we'll start with those and then go to some live questions. Alec, do you want to kind of put some questions down below? Daniel Gardner says, I'm wondering if there have been previous companies or stocks with such huge communities and bulls. Were there people who were all in on, say, Apple or Amazon and saying so 10 years ago? Was there anything to be said about this? I think for Apple, there certainly was. I don't know if it's to the degree of Tesla, but, Dave, you've been investing probably longer than me, and you saw the Apple kind of hysteria come and go. It's still there. But do you think that the investor community around Apple, like 10 years ago, how would you compare that to Tesla today's investor
Yeah.
community?
So like maybe like 2014 or 15, there's someone on Tesla Motors Club who gathered kind of the biggest. There was a big Apple forum. There
Hmm.
are several, but one of them had an investor section, and they were discussing Apple stock throughout the years. This was kind of maybe 2000, you know, 5 to 2000, maybe 13 or 14. And so
Hmm.
he printed out all of the discussions
Hmm.
as a PDF, and it was like
Wow.
hundreds and hundreds of pages. And it's so fascinating to me because when you go through it, the reality is, people are interested, are excited, but they're really they're really wishy-washy, and people are like,
Hmm.
oh, it's too expensive now, or I'm out, right? And it's like 2006 or 2008 after the iPhone, they're like, I doubled my money, I'm out, and there was really like only one guy in that whole, like, thousands, actually it's probably thousands, it was like crazy long, but
Wow.
thousands of posts, like there was one guy who really understood what was going on, and he played
Hmm.
leaps, and
Wow.
he knew what to do. And after a while, he disappeared. People were thinking like, did he buy an island or a jet or something? It's like, what's going on? um, but yeah, it was interesting. It was fascinating to see that, and early on. But yeah, with Tesla, it feels like, just starting a couple of years ago, like the investor community kind of exploded in terms of the interest in the stock. Um,
Yeah.
and there's pros and cons to that, in my opinion. I mean, it's no longer kind of like this hidden opportunity that it was, where it's no longer as counterintuitive or countercultural as it
Yeah.
was in its early days. And so you've got a lot more kind of the personality and the feel of most people coming into it is not the rebellious counter, culture, whatever, person or personality. It's more of this, they're jumping in a little bit earlier than others, maybe early adopters, not
Yep.
necessarily the first movers, but the early adopter crowd, they're jumping on, which is great. But I think it could be tricky because you think that, oh, I'm in such a great investment,
Yeah.
because so many people think that it's a great investment now, but in
Yeah.
reality, that has its cons too. It's like, sometimes the greatest investments are they feel the most loneliest. It's like you
Yeah.
feel like you're the only person in the whole world who has this idea or insight,
Yeah.
and that could be lost when you have just crowds of people, jumping in. But
Yeah, there was like an
anyways.
initial a wave like this back in 2013, 2014, right? And then it kind
Mhm.
of like the stock languished for years, and by it took years, but by 2017, 18, it felt kind of lonely to be in Tesla by that point, like 3 or 4 years later,
It's
right? There
true.
was just people were doubting it, and it took a while, but at that time that was the right time to get in. Like you said, like that's when you want to be in on these, generational companies, when it starts feeling a little counterintuitive or lonely, I guess. And
Yeah.
and then sure enough it took off, and hopefully this cycle that we're in now doesn't take another 5 years to run until the next, big, up move in the stock. But,
Yeah.
it's possible, right? I mean, these things go in cycles, and the business, while we know it's going to be fantastically successful for years to come, the stock is a whole different enigma. It doesn't follow the business, year by year. Matt and I have talked about this, something like Tesla, which is such a huge disruptor, like beyond any growth stock. It's like 2 levels above all the
Yeah.
other growth tech stocks in terms of how disruptive it is. The stock is going to be even more erratic, trying to track the business versus, a normal stock or a normal growth stock that other people are used to investing in. So it
Yeah.
could be 5 or 10 years until you kind of zoom out and see, okay, now the stock price makes sense. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, it could be a few years of just the stock hovering in a certain range or something.
Yeah. So I mean, a counter, I want to say counter, but a different angle, because like we've talked about this, where that we both, are very keenly aware that that's a real possibility. I've
Yeah.
been thinking about this other angle, which is kind of, you look at Tesla's, not just their earnings, because people can kind of look down on that as this, oh, it's still low PRE ratio, all this stuff. But if you look at their EBITDA numbers, it's
Hmm.
interesting because 2020, like, was really the breakout year where you started to
Yeah.
see significant EBITDA numbers. And then the past, you had 3 quarters of just stagnation, actually, until this
Hmm.
quarter, which you saw a big bump with EBITDA.
Yeah.
And then if you look out the next just few years, it almost looks like it's progressively going to grow, the EBITDA numbers. And one kind of other possible thesis is that stock will track EBITDA more
Hmm.
than any other metric.
That'd be great.
And,
I would
and
love
if
that.
yeah, if that's the case, that kind of explains a little bit of this, like the S&P inclusion maybe boosted it a little too high, and
Yeah.
then uh, we're stalling, but also it matches the Q4. Actually, it matches, I think, Q3, Q4, and Q1. So Q3, Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year, um, EBITDA was flat, like $1.8 billion. And
Mhm.
then this past quarter, just right now, it jumped, I think, 2.4, 2.5. So you had
Yeah.
3 quarters of flat, and then you had the jump. So it kind of makes sense if you could say, okay, well, it's tracking EBITDA, but then EBITDA is flatlined. S&P 500 kind of got it a little too high emotionally, and
Mhm.
so it's now had to reconsolidate. There could be an argument to be made where now it's going to start to track, the growth of EBITDA over the next few years more consistently.
Yeah.
Um, it's a theory right now, I don't
I
know,
think at
but
some point that's
yeah,
definitely going to happen. I agree. At some point, I just don't. I hope it's now, but I also wonder if the stock got so far. I mean, went up 10x in like 18 months.
yeah,
It's a big,
yeah,
big jump in, and I think a lot of it is overdue from the previous 5 years. But how much of
yeah,
it, I don't know. But yeah, I hope you're right that I think at some point it certainly should track the EBITDA growth rate to some degree. But maybe the stock being priced at 600 or 700 billion already market cap, is already priced in an EBITDA that's like double what it is today next year. And then once it gets beyond that, then it starts kind of going up. But 700 billion market cap is pretty
yeah,
high. It's like one of the biggest companies in the world.
yeah.
And
Okay, so
yeah,
here's going off on a little bit, like, because I don't
yeah,
see people talking about this like specific, but for example,
yeah,
if EBITDA is at 5 billion this last quarter, right? So annualized, that's $10 billion, right? But that's
yeah.
actually trailing. I mean, that's not looking forward, let's say, uh,
Next year or the
yeah,
year
next year.
after.
And everybody knows like production is probably almost going to double, right? So if you take that 10 billion EBITDA run rate, that's low. You know what I'm saying? It's too low,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Move it to 20 billion, you're saying?
Yeah, but I'm saying
Or
even off of
more.
10 billion at a $600 billion market cap, that's what a 60 multiple off of,
Yeah.
today's EBITDA, which is, well, if you double it to 20 billion EBITDA, let's say, then you're looking at a 30 times multiple off of EBITDA. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, I, I've been kind of looking a little bit into past Amazon kind of EBITDA and the multiples that people are giving, which, like
Hmm.
historically. And I think it was, don't quote me on this, but like between like it was around mostly 40 to 50, the multiple,
Hmm.
during its like growth years and stuff. So
Yeah.
you could make a
Interesting.
case that you know the that we're getting into this range where EBITDA will kind of be the maybe between 30 and 60 EBITDA will be the
Yeah.
range that the price just bounces back and forth over, over the next maybe
Yeah.
5 or 10 years. Who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and there's so many call option potentials with the self-driving coming to fruition quicker than
Hmm.
most people think, or just sometime in the next year or two, even. And this EBITDA multiple, people giving it a more favorable view on the current stock price, and there's a lot of good possibilities. If they don't sell double the cars next year for some reason. That could hurt them. But I don't see that. I think it seems very highly likely that they're going to have close to double, like 1.5 million cars or more next year sold and delivered. That's my opinion. But if that doesn't happen, then their growth isn't going to be, as fast as we anticipate, at least. And that's one small danger I have in my
Sure.
mind. I'm still holding, but
Sure.
you just don't know, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Alex, you want to go on to the next question here? Let's see. Do y'all think setting up a gigafactory in India to manufacture $25,000 EVs would be financially viable? Also, thoughts on rumors of Tesla China starting on a $25,000 vehicle at year end. I mean, I think the India thing is up in the air right now. They're negotiating. It sounds like with the government of India is kind of hardlining them, and we'll see how hardlining Elon is with India, I guess, or Tesla is. So that's sort of very uncertain in my mind. A few months ago, I thought it was probable they'd have some India business going in 2022. But now I think it's more like 50-50. What do you think, Dave, about the India stuff?
Yeah, I think the latest news was some minister was not wanting to waive or reduce the import taxes, which
Yeah,
is hurting Tesla, they can't even get a footprint, in their
yeah,
country. So yeah, if you can't even do that, I don't know how you're gonna invest in a factory. You got to take
Yeah,
the step by step, right? Um,
yeah.
yeah, so we'll
I
see
wonder
about.
if some of it has to do with the fact that, India knows that it's going to be imported from China. Yeah, where it's not going to be imported from Fremont, right? And so India
That's
and
true.
China are kind of at odds with each other, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
wonder if the Indian politicians or the political climate there is like, we don't want to import Chinese vehicles with a benefit, like this
yeah,
is not what so I wonder if that's hurting negotiations at this point. Maybe if Tesla can say, hey, we'll import it from Europe, maybe that would help. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but
yeah,
it
yeah.
just seems like maybe that could play a role of some sort. And for the second part of the question, I guess, is thoughts on rumors of Tesla China starting 20. I mean, I think that rumor's been coming around. I don't know. I think year end is still too soon in my mind, but maybe it could happen. It seems like demand. I can't tell if the demand is languishing. That's why they're reducing prices or what. Um, what do you think about the China part of the question,
Yeah,
Dave?
I mean that the rumor was from I think Ray for Tesla on Twitter. I DM'd him saying, "Hey, is the rumor source like is it legit?" He's saying the guy tweets on Weibo, and he's had several um, correct tweets about the recent price reductions before the
Hmm.
price reductions happened. Um, so yeah, I mean, it seems almost unbelievable that Tesla could actually make a $25,000 vehicle this year in China. My
Yeah.
hunch is that they are actively pushing development through, um, and they might be making maybe the prototype vehicle or something, and then maybe it gets like via the telephone game, it's like, oh, they're making the car this year, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
everyone thinks
Yeah.
like, oh, they're gonna sell the car this year when it's
Yeah.
actually the prototype, but I don't know, who
Yeah.
knows?
That's true. Yeah, I think that's probably more accurate. Yeah, I mean, they don't want to cannibalize if they have a demand thing going on. They definitely don't want that type of rumor getting legitimacy and cannibalize any Model 3 demand
Yeah,
near
definitely.
term in China, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's go to the next question. Kuma says, have you seen recent Star Talk episode with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Malcolm Gladwell? Interesting proposition that if self-driving cars are perfectly safe, will pedestrians become tyrannical jaywalkers, thereby gumming up the traffic? Thoughts? So I think maybe this has come up before. Maybe Elon's mentioned. I feel like it's been talked about once or twice. It seems like that. I'm not so concerned about jaywalkers more than like other drivers early on. Cutting off self-driving cars. They see a Tesla, like, oh, self-driving. I'll just cut that thing off. It'll get out of my way no matter what. And I could see that like being a little bit of an issue maybe earlier. Jaywalkers. I feel like people don't want to. Maybe you have some crazy jaywalkers, but I don't think people want to, it's your own life, your own body right there. It's like different than being inside a car where you can kind of be protected by a metal cage. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that, maybe it's just news stories run with that kind of thing going on. But what do you think, Dave? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched that episode. I'm just wrote it down. Hopefully, maybe I can check it out. But there was a recent episode that Lex Friedman did with this Facebook AI researcher,
Mm-hmm.
and Lex Friedman, he actually thinks that self-driving, in terms of that you could sleep in the car, and it could
Mm-hmm.
work in most situations, is 5 to 30 years out.
What?
And yeah, and his reasoning is that he thinks it's a much more complex human to robot interaction issue. It's not just a robot figuring out the environment, but it's really like understanding humans too. Um, and
That's
there's
crazy.
different levels. So one is like, how do you interact with your car to make sure the car you're overseeing it in the right way, and over time less and less supervision, right? But also the car to understand the situations. Like, he actually says that he thinks a decent part of him believes that you need AGI to solve self-driving,
Hmm.
like to the point where you'll sleep in the car, all that stuff. And like, I'm here's the thing. I think people need to understand that point of view. And I don't know if you saw this one tweet I did about Karpathy tweeted this picture of Obama,
Yes, I saw
yeah,
that.
stepping
Yeah.
on a scale, right? And how difficult
Yeah.
that situation is to
Sorry.
understand, right?
Yeah.
Most people would say, oh, you don't need to understand the situation to do self-driving, right? But what Lex Friedman is saying, and this is my hypothesis, he's saying, what if you do? What if you do
Hmm.
need to be at that level to understand the situation to really
Yeah.
crack self-driving? How
Yeah.
long is it going to take? I mean, that's his
Yeah.
perspective, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You can make a case for that because you could say in certain situations, it's so complex, and there's different people, and and nuanced communication and all this stuff in certain situations that are quite dangerous, you need to quickly analyze stuff, bring in prior knowledge of how people communicate, how they walk, and all sorts of stuff to give an assessment of the situation to make the right decision. If not, it
Yeah.
could be fatal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one angle. The other angle is you could say, well, sure, there might be super crazy corner cases that are super hard that will take a long time, but maybe the car could avoid that, just slow down and not
Yeah.
participate in that, right?
Hmm.
Um, or something, or pull over or something. And then overall, the car still can be safer than a human because humans get distracted. There's drunk driving. There's so many accidents that can be prevented. So
Yeah.
you've got the situation the human is more capable when they're fully attentive, but they're not fully attentive all the time, right? So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
question is, could the cars get to the place where they're safer statistically, but they occasionally make these crazy mistakes that the humans think is so stupid, that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
Lex Friedman is also bringing up the point of how about will society tolerate that? Will they accept that?
Mhm.
That cars kill people using stupid mistakes, but it's justifiable because they're safer and less
Overall, they're
destructible.
saving 10 times as many lives overall.
Exactly, right? So, yeah, super complex. There's if you check out his Lex Friedman's talk, go to his talk. There's timestamps, and check out the autonomous driving section. It's only about 5 or 10 minutes, but
Okay.
it actually is interesting. I think it's an important point of view that people definitely need to consider.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to watch
Yeah,
that or listen to it. I will. It makes total sense to me. Like, when does the self-driving get to a point where it's like, quote unquote, perfect in the eyes of a human, where it didn't make any misjudgment in the eyes of a human, did the best it possibly could, even in the case of like the trolley problem, it figured that
exactly.
out or whatever.
Hmm.
And that could be 5 to 20 years away. I agree, but like you were saying, to the point where it's statistically significant in saving lives, I think that's much closer than people realize. And whether or not the public and legislators tolerate it is another story. And I think that's going to go into a lot of what we discussed and how it rolls out, in a statewide, state by state, maybe in Florida first, Miami, wherever, and then other states and other countries or whatever. So I think statistics will win out over time, and I think that'll eventually it'll still be as good as in 5 or 20 years. Be like Lex is saying, as good as a human could possibly do too. So
Sure.
I think both things could be right, but I think
Yeah.
being comfortable while you're sleeping, maybe, yeah, maybe you're gonna have, maybe that'll be a while. I don't know. It's hard to say. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good question. I'll watch that for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next question. All right. So from VG928400169. Now that Elon has said that Tesla is an AI company, what areas does Dave think Tesla will focus its AI prowess on? Thanks. I think we touched on this a little bit before, but do you have
Yeah.
anything else you want to add about it? Or
Yeah, I think humanoids are a longer term. I think maybe factory robots is a good start. I
yeah,
think it segues into Elon's thoughts that Tesla's long-term competitive advantage will be manufacturing.
yeah,
I think he might be saying that because he's like, oh, we have AI, we're going to get into robots,
the
basically the
machine that
robots,
builds the machine.
yeah, makes the machine, etc. And other companies, they can't do that because they're not AI experts, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I think, that's the next logical step. I saw some job posting with Tesla talking about like robots on the factory line, like make like
yeah,
um, uh, Tesla creating their own robots. And so I think
yeah.
that it's definitely something, they'll do. To me, that's the biggest kind of question to look out for in AI Day is kind of like, okay, what is Tesla thinking? But yeah, I mean, it was helpful with George Hotz, our interview also, but he was like, oh, the path is self-driving, cooking and cleaning robots than AGI,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then, it's pretty obvious where Tesla's headed, they're going to
yeah,
robots after
yeah,
cars. Um,
yeah,
but then the bigger question is like, wait a minute, does that mean Tesla is going to solve AGI, right? And
yeah,
because basically people count out Tesla right now. They're like, oh, Google, DeepMind, all these other guys
yeah,
are way far ahead.
yeah.
But if the path to AGI does go through perhaps physical robots, um, because part of it is like, how do you understand super complex situations that involve
The
humans
physical
without
world, the
being like,
humans.
somehow
Yeah,
interacting or understanding those situations? So if Tesla really gets into that, and takes that whole another level where they get more data, better data, different data than just a Google, whatever online approach.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if they get this physical world, real world AI that's crucial for AGI, could it be that Tesla's going to be the front runner for
Yeah.
AGI? Like people aren't
Yeah.
thinking
They'll
about that
be.
right now. That's like crazy to think about. Yeah.
It is crazy. It sort of reminds me of in 2014 or whenever when he first brought up self-driving, how crazy it was to think of Tesla being a self-driving car company, technology
Yeah.
company. It was like just seemed like pie in the sky thinking, like wishful thinking. But now the same thing, is Tesla going to be an AI company? Sort of feels like in the distance, but you can see the path forward to it. And given how they've really transitioned in the past, it's easy to envision them transitioning to something major like that in the next 5 or 10 years too. So yeah, maybe we're doing chats like this 2030 and we're talking about Tesla's AI craziness of stuff they're building, and I wonder what the next thing beyond that would be. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think for sure, yeah, it's definitely in the cards, and more likely than not that there'll be a huge player in the AI space. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, next question is from Giru Thandapani. He says, can you guys talk a little bit about your thoughts on Comma AI's approach towards autonomous driving versus Tesla's approach in layman's terms? I mean, I think James Douma will do a really good job of that, but maybe you and I can quickly touch on that.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, in my opinion, they're very similar. I mean, it's you're using neural nets and vision to solve self-driving. It's, in my opinion, and this is debatable, but Tesla's had to go through this route of first solving vision, which is basically understanding, perceiving the world around, labeling everything, classifying everything, identifying
yeah,
everything. George Hotz is saying like, oh, I don't think I need that. But you have to
mm,
understand the context. One is he's not trying to push the cutting edge of full
yeah,
self-driving. He's like, we'll take the chill, just stay in the lane right now
yeah,
approach. He doesn't need to,
yeah,
do crazy stuff right now. Um,
yeah,
and the second thing is kind of like there's a debate in kind of machine learning circles, and part of it is like there's this thing called reinforcement learning, or this whole thing where it's you could um, do a video game, and you could have by basically um, giving feedback. Let's say the feedback is the score that the AI is getting in the video game. As long as you have a feedback mechanism that to evaluate performance like a score, then what and you basically just let the AI run like a billion times and they will get the best score possible. Like if
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
objective, right? And
yeah,
that's like
yeah,
the gist of like Go, solving Go is
yeah,
rather than programming the AI like, oh, do this move or this move, basically you say, okay, here's like the rules of the game
yeah,
and here's the score, right? Whether you win or lose or something, right?
yeah,
And you run it like a billion times, and the AI gets so good that it knows how to like do that ultimate game, right? Um,
yeah,
and George Hotz is basically saying, well, it could be something like that, self-driving, where you just run enough, like stuff in the system, and
hmm,
you'll learn how to play the game the best, right? The challenge with that is it does become a data problem in a sense because you could do that for easy driving situations, and I think that makes sense for George Haas. He's like, we just want driving chill. We're not even interested in turns right now. We want to make it
yeah,
feel like you're in the right lane. And so to do that, yeah, use reinforcement or use as much data from real people just keeping in their lanes and have AI figure that out where it can keep the lane as good as a human, right? That's where I think George Hotz is coming
yeah,
from. I think Tesla's solving a fundamental, much more complex problem because when you're at intersections, when you're like, doing all these complex turns and navigating, pedestrians, all this stuff, you're having to understand the world more. You're having to really know if that's a person or a cone, like that's
yeah, yeah,
important, right?
yeah,
And because of that, Tesla has had to do much more aggressive type of methods. And the other thing is like Andrej Karpathy, he caught on to reinforcement learning like super early. He did a 2016 blog post on it. He's like, he really got into the weeds. So he's like a pioneer in this stuff. It's not like he's not doing, like this stuff because he doesn't know. He knows that
yeah,
in his approach, you first have to understand the world and then you kind of apply what to do in that world, especially when it's complex, like, local city driving. And so,
yeah,
in my opinion, Tesla eventually moves over to reinforcement learning to make it feel more like a human. you know, but it just needs this extra step of understanding everything in the world
in the
accurately
world with the
first.
labeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they seem to
But
have a good auto labeling process in place by now, I think,
yeah,
given how quickly they're kind of putting out new updates, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So, all right. Yeah. Did you, I cut you off there. Did you have something
oh
else you
no,
were going
no.
to say,
Yeah,
Dave?
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that's the
Sorry.
gist of it. It's just different. Like Tesla's in a much more ambitious, more complicated, you know, they're pushing the envelope further. They need to do what they're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
They're the
But
pioneers. They know they're the pioneers. George knows he's not the pioneer. He's the settler following the pioneers. You know, pioneers are the
he
ones that
won't
get
admit
shot with
that,
arrows in
but
their back. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He doesn't want to be shot with arrows in his back. So he's just going to settle where the pioneers have gone, maybe. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, in a way.
Yeah. And in the video game analogy, one thing I was thinking of is like you're saying, to maximize the score. He's doing that just for like of the video game. He's focusing just on level 1 and level 2, the basic levels of the video game, maximizing the score
Exactly.
for the highway driving. Whereas Tesla's trying to beat the whole game, getting to level 10, and then take
Mhm.
that and maximize the score throughout the hardest levels of that game. But then also be able to apply that to other video games, maybe in the real world. You know, anyway, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
Tesla's taking a much more approach with much more potential. It's riskier, obviously, and they're the pioneers, but there's a lot more potential with Tesla's approach, I'd say, for sure. So, yeah, next question. What was the next question? I think it was up there, or it'll come up in a second. Let's see. All right, from Michael Howe. With Apple and Microsoft above the 2 trillion mark, do you think enough global money will move to and be able to support Tesla in the multi-trillions? I think so. I mean, I'm very confident by the end of the decade, I say, you know, that it'll be the largest company in the world, and Apple and Microsoft might be, you know, 4 or 5 trillion market cap companies by then. But I think Tesla will be even bigger by the end of the decade. By 2025 or 2023, unlikely, but 2025 maybe. That's my opinion. Depends if this full self-driving thing really pans out, you know, the way many of us bulls hope it will in the next couple of years. I think that's a big component of how fast Tesla's market cap goes up into the trillions. That's my opinion. I don't see Tesla's market cap going below, you know, 500 billion 2 years from now. You know, it could temporarily between now and then, but I think 2 years from now, it would be hard for me to fathom Tesla being below 500 billion market cap. But I don't know. Dave, you have any thoughts about the market cap?
yeah. I mean, like it's an interesting idea of like, is there enough global money to support super high valuations? And I would say, yeah, for sure there is. Like if you look at take a step back, you've got these bigger trends. You have technology, you have the network effects of this technology, and you've got globalization. So if you look at like a while back, I did this thing where I researched, I'm like, okay, what is the top social network, right,
Mm,
in different countries? So I was like typing in all these countries, and it's like, if you take out China from the mix, it's almost all the same in every country
yeah,
around the world. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, it's like the Facebook, the Instagram, you know, I mean, right now it's TikToks too, and all that stuff, Messenger, WhatsApp, etc. Like if you look at the top five, right, it's like pretty consistent all over the world. There's different arrangements of the top five, but if you look at also online video, so I was typing in online video, who's the top online video in all these countries? It's like YouTube by far is like in probably
by far.
95% of the countries in the world, they're the top, you know? And if you
Yeah,
think about it, it's not just the US, it's not just Western countries, it's not just English speaking countries, but this is a
yeah,
globalized thing. And we're in the early innings. And, you know, this stuff is like, it's not a US thing anymore. These are global companies writing global trends, writing global network effects. And it's hard to find the right place to put your money in. You know, it's like
yeah.
there's lack of these
There's no
opportunities. And
interest
so,
rates. There's hardly no interest rates anymore. So people
yeah,
have to put
exactly.
their money somewhere. I mean, you have so
Yeah.
much cryptocurrency. I mean, how far that goes, I don't know. But yeah, you got to put your money in something. And I think there's
Yeah.
definitely enough money to support these market, you know, multi-trillion-dollar market caps for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like the reverse question might be, it's like, what happens if too much money is moving into, you know,
Yeah.
these opportunities? Like that's
Yeah.
probably a bit more probably probable.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's go. Let's take a few more, maybe 3 more questions. Alec, you want to start with the next one? Let's see here. So, Robotaxi in Miami City in 2022 from Hassan and Investing. I mean, I think that's a likely early candidate. You know, Austin or Texas, obviously, I think could be an early candidate with the relationship Tesla's building with Texas and Austin. But I know that Miami, the mayor there, Suarez, or I think he's set on record he wants to have robo taxis in 2022 or something. So I do see that as an early candidate. I don't know where else. What do you think, Dave? Have you followed that?
Yeah, I would. So I'll bet I'll put my wager against that right now. I
Oh,
know actually Francis Suarez, the Miami city mayor, I believe replied to Hassan's tweet asking him about it, saying something to the effect of, let's go for it, let's do it. So
okay.
he wants to do it. The reality is more, in my opinion, the early rollouts of robotaxi, they need to be in areas that are super straightforward, like
Mm,
not complex at all, And I think
yeah,
that's why you go to a place, and also very welcoming, right? So that's why, for example, you go to Chandler, Arizona, where it's already welcoming, but the streets are kind of like boxed streets, not
yeah,
many people on the street, etc.
yeah,
You don't want to go to a busy city,
yeah.
Miami's a busy city. You don't want to go there to start out. You want to go to a predictable, boxy place, to roll out your
Yeah,
first instances of robotaxi, and it's probably
that's
going to be
true.
quite slow, the rollout. They want to make it right.
Yeah,
So my take.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good take. All right. Next question here. It's from Matthew. Thoughts on the virality effect on full self-driving beta going wide release? I mean, I think the wide release is a ways away, but they might widen the release. I think, Dave, you were mentioning in your video yesterday, you think they'll start widening the release slowly, right? I mean, do you think
Yeah.
that there's going to be a lot of virality, like a positive virality or negative, if there's a crash, or what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on the
I think
virality effect?
in my opinion, the bigger risk is probably the negative, news by these media
Yeah,
groups. Like, Consumer Reports is dying to get their hands on this, and
yeah, yeah,
tear it apart, right? I
yeah.
mean,
They're
it's
going to
like
try to mess it up
obvious.
so much. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like it's like bait. It's like they're just wanting. It's irresistible, because it's like stuff they're biased against already. It's gonna get them a ton of clicks,
yeah.
and it's
That's the
like,
big thing.
they'll be put into the conversation that they're part of the future, evaluating the future or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, there'll be a
Um,
leading discussion
ex-
on like news shows
exactly.
about it if they're the first ones to report negative things about it.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Um,
virality effect will be negative, if anything,
yeah, I mean, and yeah, and the hype already surrounding it is going to lead to people getting a little confused in the beginning, I think, because it is a driver assist system and
Hmm.
it needs a lot of human intervention. And there are
Yeah.
times where it just makes the worst possible move, and
Yeah.
it's scary sometimes, it's
I
like,
could,
at times
yeah.
it's great. At times it's like, you're like, whoa, this is cool. But at times you're like, whoa, this is kind
Yeah.
of,
I
yeah,
mean, I've talked about it for like the first time there's on video that like this full self-driving car runs over, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
yeah,
You can't be 100% perfect, whether it's, zero point 0.9 to the 10th power or 0.939 or whatever, it's going to happen. And I could see the wide release happening and like everyone being excited early on the first few days or week or something, and maybe even the stock going up a little bit. But then you'll have like one or two crashes on video all over the news about like full self-driving running over a kid or that didn't see or killing, something that's like horrific to see on video, like not just a news headline, like on a video clip of something that people will like. It'll be in the news like, don't watch this if you're sensitive to something, but this is the first full,
yeah,
once you have a couple of those things go, like that'll be national global news, like they'll push, like who's not gonna, we're gonna watch, everyone's gonna watch that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's gonna, I think there's a chance that could really hit the stock hard right when that starts coming out. That virality, that negative virality effect could initially hit the stock real hard, when that comes out, and that's inevitable in my opinion. um, but I mean, long term, I don't think it should matter. But depending if it's enough virality where it creates some crazy like outreach with legislators, Congress on a national level, saying let's put a hold on this until we figure it out. Like they did with Boeing 737 jets or whatever. That would be terrible if that happens.
I
Hopefully,
mean,
there's enough
I think,
statistics to back it up.
yeah, I think the thing that Tesla is going for it is it's still so-called level two, where human supervision is required. So the liability goes to the driver, and then they make it
Yeah.
clear it's the driver's liability. So even though they call it full self-driving, um, the liability is still with the driver. The driver needs to pay attention. So
Legally, yes,
it's
for
still
sure, I
legal
think.
in terms of the letter of the law. It still fits under a driver assist system. So in that
Yeah,
respect, it's not too dangerous, the negative virality, because it's kind of like
hopefully.
Tesla's like, hey, this is, not an autonomous car. This is just,
Yeah,
assisting the
it's
driver.
autopilot. Yeah, you're supposed to
Yeah,
pay
yeah,
attention.
yeah,
Yeah, that's going to be a really crazy debate. I mean, and it's going to be huge news headlines for a while if there's nothing else too major going on at that time. And then you have politicians that just
yeah,
love to prey on emotional fears, whether it's
yeah,
COVID Delta variant stuff, or if there's some video showing something horrific like this, even if there's someone self-driving, and they're
yeah,
defending themselves saying, hey, I always, blah, blah, blah. But
yeah.
yeah, I just worry about that. That's a big risk for a short-term price hit on the stock, but a
Yeah.
major price
I,
hit
w-
in the future.
I was just thinking this past week, like the name full self-driving is
Yeah,
kind of like, you know, there was this big debate, you
yeah,
know, people were like, autopilot is a bad name, they should call it something else, right? It
yeah.
leads people on too much. And then Tesla doubles down on full
FS, yeah,
self-driving, the name, right? Of all the
yeah,
different
yeah,
names they
yeah,
could have chose. And
yeah.
I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I get it. It's the whole Elon Musk approach of casting the vision of what's possible.
Hmm.
He's really into that. The whole, like, before he started SpaceX, he wanted to launch a greenhouse thing to Mars, or with the solar roof.
Yeah,
Tesla first showed that what's possible, right? Or
yeah, yeah,
like he's always into like the power of belief, of hope,
yeah,
and what that's able to catalyze and drive people toward. I think people underestimate that, but Elon's very keenly aware of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's insistent. He's like, I don't want to call this thing driver assist, like, a
cruise
backwards looking
control or
name.
something. Yeah,
Yeah, I want to give people some excitement, some hope of what this
yeah,
is going to be, right? And that I
yeah,
need an
yeah,
appropriate name for it, right? To capture
yeah,
people's imagination. Um,
yeah,
but you've got that power, but then you've also, you've got some pushback, from people who are like, wait a minute, that's misleading right now.
yeah,
But in a different perspective, rather than
yeah,
misleading, maybe it's encouraging people to be excited of its potential, future potential. As long as Tesla
yeah.
can walk that line where they're like, hey, realistically, objectively, this is not, the
Walking the line. That's the key.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's not what, you know, what some people might dream it is in the future. It's the present
yeah,
is still, this thing in work.
yeah. I mean, there'll be
Yeah,
a lot of discussion. The virality effect, whether it's negative initially or not, it'll just create a ton more dinner table discussions. It'll bring a lot more awareness. Long term, it's really good, but it'll be a big. If it's a
yeah,
negative virality, it'll be a short term. But yeah, I think that they call it FSD beta, probably to try to not make it sound as full self-driving. I mean, we know it stands for full self-driving, but maybe Elon will say, hey, it's like not a flamethrower, FSD beta. What do you mean? I'm not calling it full self-driving. It's just FSD. It can stand for anything. You might think of another name for FSD. Yeah, who knows? But
that's yeah. Actually, call it like something else, like
not FSD or something.
yeah, or something. Change the acronym, right?
Yeah, or think of a different word for the F, that sounds almost full or something. I don't know. There's
Yeah,
probably,
full supervised driving or something.
yeah, 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 full supervised. That's good. Yeah, yeah. That's our
Yeah,
name. Yeah.
exactly.
So, all right, let's go to the next question. All right, this is from Nullius on Verba. Does Tesla push into further robots AI with incentive of bringing technology to Mars? In my opinion, the long-term picture of Elon's AI interest portrayed in Genius Makers is bullish. You read Genius Makers, right, Dave? What's the picture of Elon's interest in that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, his interest was kind of more like he invested in DeepMind, um, because I think Peter Thiel, or I think someone invested and brought him in, and Elon wanted to keep tabs, right, with what DeepMind's doing. This was early on, like 2014 or so, and so he was able to keep tabs. He was getting concerned. He started OpenAI,
Mm-hmm.
but that
I
later,
remember.
when it had some problems, kind of almost went in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
Elon pulled out Andre Karpathy into Tesla, but yeah, um, yeah, but it's something that Elon is keenly aware of the risks, but also the benefits. I haven't heard Elon emphasize the risks as much as before. You know, I think he was really getting into this
Yeah.
deep concern of AGI, but I think the general consensus is like, okay, maybe it is, you know, not within the next 10 years or something. You know, it's going to take a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other question is this whole thing of if Tesla solves humanoid or just factory robots and then, you know, cleaning, cooking robots, etc., and if it really does end up them being in this pole position for AGI after they solve that, like, um, like, you know, there's tons of concerns for AGI, but it would be probably the best in our best interest if the person and company who is kind of pioneering that, it has this keen like responsibility and awareness for the good of humanity, right? And I think of
Hmm.
any person and company, you know, out there, I think Elon and Tesla fit that bill pretty well, right? So that's
Yeah.
actually a more positive view on of or take on AGI of any company out there. Who do you want solving AGI? Do you want Google or Facebook? Do you want Facebook solving AGI,
Yeah. No,
right?
no.
or Tesla, right? That is the
Or
question.
IBM. You don't want IBM either.
Exactly.
Yeah. You don't want like
Yeah,
some big
yeah,
corporation either. Yeah. Yeah. I
exactly.
think that I think also in Mars, it's going to be a big part of Mars's future is when you have these, you know, you can have more many more, like right now we think of humans going to Mars, and yeah, there'll be some humans, but I think you'll have like a ratio of like capable robots to humans, probably like 10 to 1 or 100 to 1 even. I don't know. Like you'll have people there to kind of supervise things and maybe reprogram a few things here and there or whatever. But I think you'll have a ton of robots, like whether it's terraforming Mars or just building the underground um, systems to live in, and you know, whatever the domes that they might
Yeah.
have to build or whatever. I think you'll have, you know, that's part of Elon's vision too, is like, you know, once they build the robots on Earth, like, you know, they can build the robots for Mars too and send them over there, and they'll be solar powered or whatever. You know, I think robots will be a huge part of the Mars colonization plan,
Yeah.
and Tesla and SpaceX are kind of going to be symbiotic in that way in the
Definitely.
future.
I tweeted this poll. I'm like, what company are you more excited about, Tesla or SpaceX?
Yeah,
And I think
I
it's like
picked
60,
SpaceX. I
yeah,
picked SpaceX. Yeah.
60-40 said Tesla. But the more I'm thinking about it, I was talking to my wife yesterday. I'm like, SpaceX, like Tesla's mission is much more like, um, it's much more defined. It's not
Yeah.
like as unlimited in
Yeah.
potential in terms of its possibilities, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Tesla, it's clear next 10 years, like they build cars, energy, you know, robots, etc. But for SpaceX, it's like so open-ended and the universe is so crazy. And it's like
Yeah.
how many, it's not like how many years is SpaceX going to be around. It's like if history continues or, you know, it's like how many centuries or so. It's just crazy to think about the, the, the total addressable market for SpaceX is so crazy. It's like,
So
you know, it's
huge.
like it's we don't even know how to, you know,
Yeah.
really calculate
Quantify
that.
that.
Exactly.
That's going to be ultimately, that's going to be the, you know, could easily be the biggest company, much bigger than Tesla in 30 years, 20 years. You know,
Yeah.
it's just huge potential.
Yeah. And have you been tracking what they're doing with this whole uh their heavy booster, there's so like they're trying to frantically get like into orbit, right? There's their super heavy booster, and they're starting to make multiply. It's like 5 to 10 of their starships are making at the same time right now, and
Yeah.
they're trying to test this, and the rumor has it they're trying to test it within a week or so. But the thing is, like, I think they're trying to. There's a window opening to go to Mars, and
Yes.
supposedly it's like 12 days or something in September of 2022
Only
that you
12
could,
days.
or
Oh,
something like
wow.
that.
Well, maybe with the
Yeah.
limitations we have right now, but in the future, the windows will be bigger. But maybe
Um,
with what they can reasonably do now, they think it's about a
no,
12-day window.
no, it's actually like the positioning of like Mars and Earth and all this stuff. That
Yeah.
it's that's where it's, yeah, maybe it could be a
It's
little bit
every two
longer.
years or every three
Yeah,
years. Yeah.
but
There's like I thought it was a 3-month window, but
yeah, it could be longer. But um,
maybe with their limitations, it's 12 days this
yeah,
time
so
around.
I think Elon is frantically trying to get something done by that date. And my hunch is, I
Yeah.
wonder if he's trying to launch 10 starships to Mars in
Wow.
September 20, next year.
That'd be
I wonder if
incredible.
that's the plan. And if he's going to launch 10, what is he going to put in all those starships, right? Like this is crazy.
Some raw materials that they'll need later, I bet. That's what
Yeah.
they could
And
do,
then
right?
like I don't know if this is what he's going to do, but can you imagine these starships have to, so the heavy booster launches the starships into orbit. They stay in orbit, right? Until they, and so they it launches one at a time. So this will probably happen over a few months, and then they
Yeah.
hang out there together, and then they start their journey to Mars at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
can you imagine like if Tesla, or not Tesla, if Elon and SpaceX does this next year? Like
That'd
they're
be
launching
incredible.
10 starships in orbit,
Yeah.
and they all launch at the same time to Mars. Like
Yeah.
this is like, holy moly, like
Insane. I mean, I thought that
insanity.
was going to be 2025 or something, but 2023, that'd be incredible. Like, it's just like
Yeah,
that vision that's outlined in Suburban's Wait But Why SpaceX, 3-part
yeah,
series or whatever is
yeah,
coming to fruition faster than we think. It's pretty
yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
I mean, I don't
It's
know.
going to be so fun.
I'm not following it enough to know like
Yeah.
what a realistic possibility it is, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm starting to think I need to interview and talk with some SpaceX experts, like people who are really into try to figure out like, okay, what is, all the steps, they need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. I'm really curious to see what happens. Let's do one more question, then
sure.
we'll let you go, Dave.
All
All
right,
right.
no worries.
Let's see here. All right. Last question's from Alex B. Are you going to make a video on Lemonade Q2 earnings review? What's your expectations? I mean, for me, Lemonade, I definitely have been following them. I am very curious. I think their earnings is later this week. They took some questions on Say. I haven't reviewed those questions myself. And, Matt and I will certainly talk about it probably on our next week live chat. We've been following it because it's part of our portfolio in the fund. And, our thesis is that Lemonade is disrupting the insurance industry, is a true insurtech player. They're the only ones in that space kind of building their own backbone technology. The other insurtech players are sort of piggybacking off of the existing legacy insurance providers, and so they can't adapt and change quickly. And therefore, the interface of Lemonade is really good, and they have lower costs. And so we're really curious to see the metrics they put out in this quarterly earnings later this week. And we don't really have a forecast. I mean, I think it's like a 5 billion market cap company right now. I mean, I could see it. Our thesis is we think that there's at least a 20 to 25% chance in 2 years it could be like valued at a 20 billion market cap, in two years from now or something. Like, that's not greater than 50%, but we think it's a significant probability where it's worth taking some risk reward placed bets that we've done. So that's sort of our thesis on it. David, you've been following Lemonade still, or do you have any thoughts on the Q2 earnings?
So the few things I'm looking out for is, one is like I'm basically looking out for their CFO to keep his word, right? To keep his I want to, because he's a smart guy, and I want to see that their growth is still like intact and healthy. So I want to see some healthy customer acquisition numbers, growing, kind of premium per customer, and I also want to see like their marketing costs. Like sometimes they talk about that, like how much it is costing them to acquire, and how long it takes to get back that money. I want to see that continually improve. As long as they're growing and they have a mechanism to grow, right? Like that's going to be key. And then the third area is obviously this whole auto insurance thing that they're launching.
Yeah,
And so it's
big.
already like August, and they've been talking about this for a while. So this
Yeah.
has got to launch in the next, by the end of the year. Yeah, it's
That's the
going to be
big
a
one.
big, yeah, it's going to be a big question. How do you get people over to auto, and compete with the big insurance companies? But yeah, it's a lot of, I think Lemonade is, like I think they've hit some type of, they're not growing as fast as before with renters, or let's say home insurance is kind of tough. So the big
Yeah.
question mark is like, is auto going to be like a new green pasture for them where they're growing super fast, or is it going to be more difficult, like slower growth?
Yeah.
Like really slow growth. So the question mark is, yeah, will auto will show like some things
It's a
about
lot of potential
Lemonade.
with auto.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
potential with the auto if they execute it well. And I agree. I mean, that's a huge upside potential, and it could hurt them if it flops. But I got to think that the auto part has a lot of more upside, possibility on their business than downside. They haven't done auto, and their stock was doing well without auto, decently at least. And now they're adding this in, which to me is more important than all their other insurances combined if they execute it well. So I'm hopeful if they can execute it well, word gets around, that Lemonade Auto is killer and lots of people start signing up for it. And that's like an insurance everyone sort of like, I feel like shops around a little bit more for than other types of insurance. I mean, just from my personal experience, homeowners insurance or whatever other insurance, never really shopped around for most insurances. I'm just like, whatever I'm used to sign up. But for auto insurance in the past, before Tesla or even with Tesla, I've always kind of kept my mind open to like, what else is out there? What's the best out there? And so Lemonade, they have a real opportunity here to kind of really disrupt the auto insurance market. So we'll see.
One company I would suggest you and Matt to look into is Oscar. So
Oscar, okay.
Yeah, it's a health insurance company. It's actually, when we moved to Texas, we were looking for health insurance. Our insurance wouldn't transfer over to Texas. So we were looking at different providers, and we actually ended up signing up for Oscar.
OSCAR?
Yeah, so they were, I think, a startup out of New York, trying to reinvent health insurance. I've heard about them in the past, but I'm like, it's hard to evaluate it, right? And so by having their insurance for the past 7 months, my wife has been super impressed. It's like the sign up process is like, it's like a tech experience. It's like just super simple. Even like getting appointments or, whatever, just whatever we need, it's super easy. You just kind of chat with somebody, and it's not all bottish. It's actually, you get, some people to chat with.
Oh, we'll check it out.
She's almost considering it as like, wow, this is super, it's almost getting like close to an ideal like health insurance like experience, which is incredible for health insurance, which is typically like, bogged down. But they don't compete on price. So they're the same price as other insurance companies.
Just a much better experience.
But it's 100% on experience. They do like a lot of telemedicine as well, but they also refer you out. So they're competing on the quality of experience. But yeah, definitely check them out.
I'll check them out.
Company. Yeah, I think
they're publicly traded, or
yes,
I can check
they went IPO just several months ago. They're kind of their price is just stalled out, and it is more of a longer term play in my opinion, because this is like,
takes a while to develop.
Yeah.
I wonder what their market cap is. Let me see if I can find it here. I bet it's Oscar Health. Is 3.2 billion. Well, that's small, relatively small market cap for a big health insurance play. It's probably highly valued.
Yeah, have Matt. Actually, I would be interested in this research too. So send it to me too. But ask him to do like a 5-year like projection on their numbers, like the number of members they have, their revenue, take their margin, give some multiples and stuff. I'd like to see kind of a 5-year trajectory to see if like, what type of, potential that the company might have. But in terms of business and how they're executing, super impressed.
Yeah, that's great. All right. No, thanks for the tip. We'll look into that. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, anything else you wanted to chat about, Dave, or anything?
No. I think a lot of stuff. It's always fun chatting. I want to extend an offer, just like I'm willing to chat with you anytime.
Oh, thanks.
I think what you're doing with Good Soil is a great thing. I think you and Matt and your team have a lot of potential, and
thanks.
Like with these live streams, I think they're going to be great. They are great already, but I think more and more people will find out. I wouldn't be discouraged with just like, whatever to turn out in the beginning, because you're going to build that. So I'm happy to come on anytime, even if it's just a few people watching. I don't care. I feel like the conversation is worth it. What you guys are doing is worth it. So definitely want to, do whatever I can to support guys.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate the encouragement and support.
Yeah,
great.
No worries.
All right. Well, looking forward to watch your chat later with James. So for that, I guess we'll see everyone next week. And thanks again, Dave. And we'll be talking soon anyway, I'm sure. All right.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
All right.
All right.
Take care.